Since the Qin and Han dynasties, almost every Chinese emperor began planning and building his own mausoleum soon after ascending the throne. The tradition lasted for more than 2,000 years and became a hallmark of Chinese imperial culture. China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, began constructing his vast mausoleum at Mount Li shortly after taking the throne at the age of 13. During the Han Dynasty, emperors typically ordered work to begin in the second year of their reign. The same practice continued through the Tang, Song, Ming, and Qing dynasties. Rather than waiting until the end of their lives to arrange their burial, emperors devoted enormous resources to building their eternal resting place from the moment they secured supreme power. The tradition grew out of deeply rooted beliefs about the afterlife. Ancient Chinese believed that death marked the beginning of another existence, rather than the end of one. An emperor's tomb therefore had to rival or even surpass the grandeur of the palace he occupied in life. Only by overseeing its construction personally could he ensure that every detail, from its scale and layout to its feng shui and defenses against tomb robbers, reflected his own wishes and preserved his dignity for eternity. A mausoleum also served as a lasting monument to an emperor's achievements. Beginning construction early allowed it to be refined over decades instead of being rushed after his death. Through the sheer scale of the tomb and the richness of its burial objects, an emperor proclaimed to future generations that he ruled under the mandate of heaven and had surpassed those who came before him. Li Shimin, better known as Emperor Taizong of Tang, was no exception. Soon after becoming emperor, he chose Juzong Mountain in present-day Liquan County, Shanxi Province, as the site of his imperial tomb. Using the mountain itself as part of the mausoleum, he began construction of what would become the magnificent Zhaoling Mausoleum. In AD 636, as work on the mausoleum was underway, Li Shimin made a deeply personal decision. He ordered 6 stone reliefs to be carved in honor of the warhorses that had carried him through years of campaigns, surviving countless battles at his side. The reliefs were placed on either side of the northern sacrificial altar of the mausoleum. Together, they became known as the Six Steeds of Zhaoling. Li Shimin's deep personal attachment to his warhorses was the most direct reason behind the creation of the Six Steeds. Among them was Sarozi, now preserved at the Penn Museum in Philadelphia. It was one of Emperor Taizong's most cherished warhorses, and one of the 2 Zhaoling reliefs now located in the United States. Sarozi was a powerful and imposing horse with a reddish-purple coat. Its name, believed to come from a Turkic language, carried the meaning of a brave warrior or hero. The horse itself became a symbol of courage, loyalty, and unwavering devotion. In AD 1621, Li Shimin led his army eastward to Luoyang and fought in the Battle of Mangshan. Sarozi carried him into the heart of the battlefield, charging forward through fierce combat. But during the fighting, an enemy arrow struck the horse in the chest, leaving it badly wounded and bleeding. At that moment, Li Shimin had become separated from his main forces. Only the general Qiu Xinggong remained by his side. Qiu turned his horse around and fired arrows repeatedly to drive back the pursuing enemies. He then dismounted, pulled out the arrow deeply embedded in Saru's body, and gave his own horse to Li Shimin. Holding the wounded Saruzi with one hand and wielding his sword with the other, Qiu Xinggong fought fiercely through the chaos, cutting down enemy soldiers and protecting Li Shimin as they broke out of danger. This very moment was the scene later captured in the stone relief, Qiu Xinggong removing the arrow from Sarozi's body. After returning to camp, Sarozi eventually died from its wounds. In memory of the horse that had saved his life on the battlefield, Li Shimin personally composed an inscription in its honor. Purple swallow leaps beyond the clouds. Its bones carried the spirit of a divine steed. Its power shook the lands of the 3 rivers, and its might surpassed the formations of countless armies. The other Zhaoling steed preserved alongside Seed at the Penn Museum is Chen Maogua. Unlike Sidozi, which had a reddish-purple coat, Chen Maogua was covered with yellow hair and had a dark-colored muzzle. Its body was covered with naturally curled patterns of hair resembling small rings, giving it the name Chen Maogua, meaning a horse with curled hair. In AD 622, when Li Shimin led his army to suppress a major rebellion, it was Chen Maogua that carried him into battle. The fighting was fierce. The horse was struck by 9 arrows, yet it continued carrying Li Shimin through the battlefield, charging forward amid blood and fire until it finally fell in combat. Li Shimin deeply remembered the courage and sacrifice of this horse. Later, he ordered craftsmen to preserve its image in stone. In the relief, Chen Maogua stands with its head held high despite the arrows piercing its body. Its powerful posture and steady movement convey a sense of strength, endurance, and defiance in the face of death. As the most heavily wounded of the Six Steeds, it represents the brutal sacrifices made during the Tang dynasty's wars of unification. Li Shimin wrote the following inscription for Chimogua. The moon's spirit held the reins. The heavenly steed charged across the earth. The arrows were finally put away, and the dust of war was swept away. Unlike the symbolic guardian figures and ceremonial sculptures commonly found in many imperial tombs, the Six Steeds of Zhaoling mausoleum represent real horses from Li Shimin's own military career. They were the 6 war horses that carried him through his most important campaigns. Sa Luzi and Chen Mogua, now housed at the Penn Museum in Philadelphia, and Shi Fa Qi, Qingjui, Tele Biao, and Bai Ti Wu, preserved at the Xi'an Beilin Museum in China. They are not merely masterpieces of Tang Dynasty sculpture. They are also a deeply personal tribute from Li Shimin to the companions who had fought beside him through life and death battles. Through these stone carvings, memories of loyalty, sacrifice, and shared victories were given a lasting presence. To preserve those moments of courage and devotion forever, Li Shimin chose the highest artistic expression of his time, carving their images into stone as part of the construction of the Zhaoling Mausoleum. The 6 steeds were not simply a collection of his favorite horses. Each was carefully selected from the mounts that accompanied him during the crucial military campaigns between 618 and 622. These victories allowed him to defeat rival powers and ultimately unify China under the Tang dynasty. The names of many of these horses were derived from Turkic or Central Asian languages, reflecting the Tang dynasty's openness toward different cultures, its interaction with the outside world, and the powerful military influence it held across Eurasia. The creation of the 6 Steeds of Zhaoling Mausoleum was overseen by 2 renowned artists of the Tang dynasty, the brothers Yan Li Ben and Yan Dida. Yan Li Ben was one of the greatest court painters of his time. He was responsible for creating the original designs and preliminary drawings of the 6 horses. His elder brother, Yan Nida, served as the project supervisor and directed the craftsmen who carried out the actual carving. According to tradition, Li Shimin first commissioned Yan Li Ben to create the designs, which were then used by Yan Dutta to guide the artisans in transforming the images into stone. The production process was both meticulous and highly skilled. The stone was carefully selected from high-quality limestone quarried in Fuping, Shanxi province. Fine-grained yet durable, it was ideally suited for large-scale high-relief sculpture. Each stone panel measured approximately 1.7 meters in height, 2 meters in width, and 0.3 meters in thickness, weighing around 2.5 tons. The craftsmen first transferred the designs onto the surface of the stone. They then used a technique known as sunken background high relief, carving away the surrounding stone to make the horses emerge vividly from the surface. The reliefs reached a depth of nearly 15 centimeters, creating a powerful sense of volume and movement. Every detail was carefully rendered: the muscles beneath the horse's skin, the texture of their coats, and even the wounds left by enemy arrows. Some of the carvings still preserve the traces of the battlefield, showing arrows embedded in the bodies of the horses. After the sculptures were completed, the inscriptions personally composed by Li Shimin were carved into the stone by skilled calligraphers. The placement of the 6 steeds was also carefully planned. They were divided into 2 groups and placed inside the corridors on the eastern and western sides of the northern sacrificial area of the Zhaoling Mausoleum, facing south toward the main ceremonial hall. Together with the stone statues of foreign envoys, they stood as guardians of the imperial tomb. This arrangement echoed the design of Chang'an, the Tang capital, while also carrying the military symbolism of the Northern Gate and the protective power of the Xuanwu tradition. The creation of the 6 Steeds of Zhaoling brought together Li Shimin's personal memories, political ambitions, and the highest artistic achievements of the Tang dynasty. They became one of the greatest masterpieces of ancient Chinese tomb sculpture. They were more than eternal memorials to six warhorses. They became a lasting image of the spirit, power, and ambition of the Tang Empire at its height. For more than 13 centuries, the Six Steeds of Zhaoling mausoleum quietly stood on Juzong Mountain in Liquan County, Shanxi, keeping watch beside the final resting place of Emperor Taizong of Tang. They were not only extraordinary masterpieces of Tang stone sculpture, but also enduring symbols of the loyalty and sacrifice that accompanied the founding of the Tang dynasty. Yet by the beginning of the 20th century, China had entered an era of turmoil. The country was divided by warlords, conflicts spread across the land, and the protection of cultural heritage remained extremely fragile. Under such unstable conditions, even an imperial mausoleum could not escape the attention of international antiquities dealers. Countless priceless relics became targets for foreign collectors and domestic criminals alike. The Six Steeds, which had stood untouched for centuries, were finally approaching the darkest chapter of their history. In the 1910s, a plan began to take shape, a scheme that would send two of these legendary horses across the ocean. Between 1912 and 1913, the first foreign attempt to seize the Six Steeds began to emerge. The French antiquities dealer Paul Malin, who had been active in China for many years, had long coveted the Zhaoling reliefs. Through French intermediaries in Beijing, including a man named Monsieur Moncel, he secretly organized a plan to remove the sculptures from the mausoleum. They hired a foreign accomplice named Glanz, who gathered local thieves and hired laborers for the operation. Under the cover of darkness, the group entered Juzong Mountain and approached the Zhaoling mausoleum. The thieves had already prepared the tools needed to cut the massive stone panels apart, hoping to divide the six reliefs into smaller pieces and transport them down the mountain. However, when they began moving, Sa Luzi and Chen Maogua, nearby villagers, heard the unusual sounds coming from the mausoleum. The news quickly spread throughout the surrounding villages. Angry villagers gathered together, carrying farming tools and torches, and rushed to stop the thieves. Chaos broke out at the scene. Fearing that they would be caught, the thieves panicked. In desperation, they pushed the two already cut stone reliefs down the steep mountainside. The massive stone panels crashed down the slope with heavy, thunderous impacts, breaking into several pieces and suffering serious damage. The villagers later gathered and protected the remaining fragments before reporting the incident to local authorities. The Shanxi government collected the damaged reliefs and placed them in temporary storage. The attempted theft had failed, but it revealed a much greater danger. The Six Steeds were no longer beyond reach. They had become targets coveted by antiquities dealers from around the world. After the first attempt failed, the antiquities dealers did not give up. Between 1915 and in 1916, the Beijing antique dealer Zhao Hafang became a key figure in the fate of the Six Steeds. Using his close connections with Yuan Ke-wen, the second son of President Yuan Shikai, Zhao carefully arranged a plan. Under the pretext of obtaining stone sculptures for the decoration of the Yuan family garden, he requested permission from Lu Jianzong, the military governor of Shanxi at the time, to transport the already dismantled reliefs to Beijing. Lu Jianzong controlled both the military and political affairs of Shanxi. Seeking favor with Yuan Shikai's government, he ordered the two damaged reliefs, Sa Ruzi and Chen Maogua, which had been kept under official custody, to be shipped north. The stone fragments were carefully loaded onto carts and escorted by soldiers. They traveled slowly across difficult land routes toward Beijing. Throughout the journey, the fragile sculptures remained at constant risk of suffering further damage. Yet they eventually arrived in the capital. Once in Beijing, the two reliefs soon changed hands and came into the possession of C.T. Lu, one of the most influential international antiquities dealers of the 20th century. Having long operated within the China-United States art and antiquities trade network, Lu understood how to handle and market important cultural treasures. In 1917, he quickly took control of the two sculptures, assessed their value, and began secretly planning their transfer across the Pacific to the United States. Liu understood that transporting the reliefs as complete stone panels would carry enormous risks. He personally directed craftsmen to further dismantle Sadozi and chamois into smaller sections that could be more easily transported. Each piece was carefully cut, numbered, and marked at the breaks so that the sculptures could later be reassembled after arriving in the United States. To avoid inspection by Chinese customs officials and local authorities, Liu disguised the stone fragments as ordinary building materials or commercial goods. They were packed into wooden crates together with other merchandise, with labels describing them as common stone products or materials for commercial use. Using his network of connections at ports such as Shanghai and Tianjin, and through methods that included bribery and falsified documents, he managed to bypass restrictions on the export of cultural objects. The crates were quietly loaded onto a ship and sent across the Pacific. After a long and uncertain voyage, the disguised cargo finally arrived in New York in March 1918. Liu removed the stone fragments in a warehouse and partially reassembled them to make them easier to present to potential buyers. When Dr. George Byron Gordon, director of the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, entered the warehouse and saw the Tang Dynasty reliefs for the first time, he was immediately captivated by their artistic power. Although they had suffered damage during dismantling and transportation, the emotional scenes carved into the stone remained unmistakable. Sadu Zi, capturing the dramatic moment when Tuzingon removed the arrow from its body, and Chen Maohua standing firm despite the 9 arrows that had struck it. The two sculptures still carried the powerful presence of the battlefield and the memory of the Tang Empire. Gordon immediately decided that these masterpieces had to become part of the museum's collection. A formal negotiation for their acquisition soon began. Deeply moved by the sculptures, Gordon launched an effort to secure their purchase. From 1918 to 1920, he spent 2 years raising funds from various sources. At the time, the price of $125,000 was an enormous sum, equivalent to several $1,000,000 today. The University of Pennsylvania itself had limited financial resources, so Gordon turned to university alumni, wealthy Philadelphia businessmen, and philanthropists for support. Eventually, the renowned Philadelphia industrialist and philanthropist Eldridge R. Johnson provided the crucial financial assistance. At the end of 1920, the University of Pennsylvania and C.T. Liu officially completed the transaction, purchasing the two reliefs, Sa Luzi and Chen Maohua, for $125,000. After the acquisition, the two sculptures were carefully transported to the University of Pennsylvania Museum and installed in the newly opened China Gallery. Placed in a prominent location, they became among the museum's most treasured Asian art holdings. Gordon personally arranged their display, allowing visitors to experience the power and craftsmanship of Tang Dynasty sculpture at close range. An inscription honoring Johnson's donation was carved onto the base of the sculptures, commemorating the important acquisition. From that moment on, the two horses that had once carried Li Shimin through countless battles left Juzong Mountain behind. They crossed the ocean and arrived at the Penn Museum, the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. Meanwhile, the remaining 4 steeds of Zhaoling, Shifachi, Qingjui, Telebiao, and Baitiwu, could not completely escape their own tragedy. In 1918, the same year that Sado Zi and Chen Maohua were taken to the United States, another group of thieves attempted to seize the remaining 4 reliefs. Working with figures including the Shanxi warlord Chen Shufan, they planned to remove the sculptures and take them out of the region. The thieves brutally broke the stone panels into multiple pieces and packed them into wooden crates, preparing to transport them away. However, once again, the attempt met strong resistance. Local residents, scholars, and some officials quickly responded after learning of the plan. Through public opposition and direct intervention, they managed to intercept the fragments before they could be taken away. Although the 4 reliefs had already suffered severe damage, with countless cracks and broken sections, They were never sent overseas. After years of movement and uncertainty, they were first preserved at the Shanxi Provincial Library and later transferred to the Xi'an Museum, where they remain protected today. The separation of the six horses that once stood together, guarding Zhaoling, became one of the greatest regrets in the history of modern Chinese cultural heritage preservation. In 2010, specialists from Shanxi's cultural heritage authorities brought limestone from the original quarry area in Fuping to the Penn Museum in the United States. There, they carefully restored Sat Luci and Chen Maogua, allowing the two displaced horses to regain much of their former dignity. Yet restoration could repair physical damage, but it could not erase the reality that the six horses were no longer together. The six steeds that had once fought beside Li Shimin, sharing the same battles and guarding the same imperial tomb, now exist in two distant worlds. Four remain in Xi'an, facing the land of Guangzhong where the Tang Empire once rose. Two stand thousands of miles away in Philadelphia, carrying with them the memory of the grandeur of the Tang dynasty. Their fragmentation is not merely a loss of stone and art, but a severed narrative of a nation's golden age. It is a question left behind by history itself. And even today, many still hope that one day the Six Steeds of Zhaoling may truly be reunited, standing together once again beneath Juzong Mountain, continuing their silent watch over the resting place of one of China's greatest emperors.